Welcome to Mars Venus Coaching. I am your gender intelligence coach, Clay Smith. Defensiveness is the first act of war. That's a pretty well known quote by a lady named Byron Katie. She talks about the war that we create for ourselves and with others when we let defensiveness creep in on our relationships. But what does it feel like? What does it look like? Without an awareness of what this experience is, the feeling arises and causes division amongst those who matter most to us. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about defensiveness. I'm going to offer you an explanation of what it is in the context of a relationship. We're going to gain clarity on what it looks like, how to spot it out in others and in yourself. We're also going to dive deeper into understanding why we get defensive. And lastly, I want to leave you with a game plan for how you can communicate to your partner when they're being defensive towards you. So, what is defensiveness? I mean, you can't really measure it. It holds no metric volume. We can't just pick up a 2-pack at Costco. Defensiveness is a feeling, an experience, a behavior. The derived conclusion is that defensiveness is a psychological or emotional response characterized by reacting to perceived criticism, blame, or threat with protective behavior such as denial, justification, counterattacks, or avoidance. It often arises when a person feels vulnerable, misunderstood, or unfairly judged and seeks to shield themselves from emotional discomfort or responsibility. What does defensiveness look like? In relationships, it can manifest itself through shifting blame onto others rather than taking accountability, interrupting or arguing to protect oneself from perceived attacks, minimizing or dismissing the other person's concerns, making excuses rather than acknowledging the issue. What does it feel like? Well, defensiveness is a protective barrier to a perceived threat. I'm going to give you two analogies. One analogy is a physical defensiveness, and the other is more of an emotional defensiveness. To better understanding what defensiveness feels like, remember those college days when you went tent camping. And I'm not talking about pulling up with your brand new RV on a beautiful lakeside, enjoying all the amenities of the city while being in a forest. No, I'm talking about the tent camping with like the sleeping bags. Imagine you're finishing up for the day, you watch the sunset, enjoying a beer around the campfire. It's getting late, and you're thinking, you know what, we probably should start wrapping things up. So you put the fire out, you pack all the stuff away, you put the cooler in the car, that way we don't have any night intruders, and you get in your sleeping bag and turn in for the night. A little while, you hear some rustling outside. You're seeing some shadows going on. Actually, you're kind of hearing some like heavy breathing and some footprints. As this object approaches your tent, you're kind of seeing what you can make as like a bear in the shadows through the tent. What's that initial feeling? Fear. That's what defensiveness feels like. It starts off with fear and later goes to frustration and moves to anger. When we get stressed out, our elevated cortisol levels put us in that fight or flight mode. We're either going to jump up and fight the bear off, or we're going to run like hell. Defensiveness in a relationship might feel similar: fear, frustration, anger. Also, it protects you from that other person. An analogy to kind of best understanding how that feels is to think of a medieval castle. Under attack, the drawbridges come up. The bars on the windows get locked. The moat with the alligators fend off any people on the bottom. At the top of the castle, we have archers poised, bowstring taut, arrows locked and ready to fly. Their sharp gaze is locked onto the target, waiting for a perfect moment to attack. So, what does defensiveness sound like? Here are some common phrases to detect defensiveness in yourself and with those you communicate with. It tries to deny responsibility by saying, I didn't do anything wrong. That wasn't my fault. You're just overreacting. I didn't mean it that way. Why do you shouldn't be so upset? Defensiveness tries to deflect or change the subject by saying, yeah, well, what about you when you did XYZ? You always bring this up at the worst time. This is exactly why I can't talk to you about things. It tries to minimize or dismiss feelings by saying, hey, it's not a big deal. You're just being too sensitive. Why are you making such a fuss over nothing? It tries to make excuses by saying, I was just tired, okay? I didn't know that would bother you. That's just how I am. You should know that by now. Defensiveness tries to counterattack or blame by saying, well, if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't do that. You're not perfect either. Maybe if you would have just listened to me for once, this wouldn't have happened. It tries to withdraw or shut down by saying, forget it, I'm done talking about this. Whatever, believe what you want. I don't have to explain myself to you. Can you just stop and feel that defensive energy? Can you pick up on that? I want you to create an awareness of what it is and what it sounds like and what it feels like, where you could essentially walk into a room with a person arguing with another person and just pick up on that defensiveness, where the tension is so great you could cut it with a knife. Now that you can conceptualize what defensiveness is, let's dig a little bit deeper into understanding why we choose defensiveness over connection. So, why do we get defensive? Well, we experience it when we feel misrepresented. It comes from a place of feeling judged or criticized. We experience this sensation when we're anticipating emotional injury. Like I mentioned before, the root word of defensiveness is to defend or protect. But what are we protecting? Who is in the castle? Of course, that's our ego. If you want to know what your ego looks like, just ask yourself, what do you want other people to see or think of you as? Your boss, your relatives, your significant other. What do you want them to think of you as? Create a list. Here's how you can identify your ego. What would you want your boss to think of you as? Would you want her to see you as ambitious and hardworking, driven, dedicated, goal-oriented, confident, but not arrogant, trustworthy, reliable, honest, dependable? How would you want your friend to see you? Someone who's kind and compassionate, a loyal and faithful, supportive supportive friend through challenges. Maybe someone who's honest and authentic, transparent, tells it like it is. Maybe somebody who's funny and lighthearted, a friend who brings joy and humor and positivity to the group. What would you want your family members to think of you as a parent? Would they want them to say, wow, she is such a loving and supportive mom, so involved and engaged? She just is patient and understands that little guy when he was throwing a fit in the grocery store. Oh, wow, just what a sweetheart, just providing so much love and guidance to her child. What do you want your partner to think of you as? Someone who's loving and affectionate? Well, trustworthy and loyal for sure. Someone who's supportive and encouraging them? Respectful, considerate. I think at the heart of it, we would want to be seen as someone who adds value to our partner's life. A true partner in love and growth and connection. The problem arises is we're all closed up and ready for attack. But those that we're protected against, well, they have our house keys. They sleep in the same bed with us. They have access to our bank accounts. There's a cognitive dissonance with defensiveness. So let's talk about the defensiveness dilemma. Defensiveness has a very dichotomous nature with connection in a relationship. Just like you can't have pure light and pure darkness coincide in the same room at the same time, so too with connection versus defensiveness in a relationship with a significant other. When you're trying to defend or protect your ego, essentially you're making a list of checkboxes that you would like all of the people in your life to see you as. You're walking up to them and you're saying, "Hi, my name's Clay. Nice to meet you. Would you kindly just check all of these boxes of the qualities that you think that I am, that I want you to think that I am, or else we're not going to have a good day." But you're seeking approval. This is going to put way too much pressure for others to just constantly validate you. This actually exhausts people around you. Your partner has to walk on eggshells to avoid the landmines. I mean, they have to check all your boxes, right? They make a comment that might threaten one of those boxes getting unchecked, and now you've got to hire the best emotional defense attorney you can find. In an argument or a fight, they know they've got you by the balls because all they got to do is click unselect all, and now that defensiveness comes in where you need to prove that you're right and they're wrong. So let's talk about some mental shifts to help eliminate defensiveness on your side. As I mentioned earlier, Byron Katie wrote a book called A Mind at Home with Itself. She talks about in that book there's 3 kinds of business. There's my business, your business, and God's business. And that's the God of your understanding. She says, when you're seeking approval from other people, concerned about what they think about you, if they're checking all of your boxes, essentially you're in their business, dictating what they should think in reference to you. When you're in their business, who's in your business? But Clay, I could be in my business and their business, right? Nope. You're in their business, thinking that they should think a certain way about you, check all your boxes. Nobody's home in your business. She mentions, what other people think of you is really none of your business. I love her prayer. She says, "Dear God, spare me from the desire for love, approval, and appreciation. Amen." You got to remember, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Let's talk about how to respond to a defensive person. I think first and foremost, Even though they're not choosing to be connected, you can still be connected to them. It only takes one human to have a healthy relationship. And guess what? It's you. Katie's best recommendations for responding to defensiveness is to turn inward. Question those thoughts that trigger it. Katie teaches that defensiveness arises when we believe a stressful thought without questioning its truth. Her process, the work, helps people shift from reacting defensively to responding with openness and curiosity. She recommends to pause and notice. Instead of reacting, observe your defensiveness. Ask yourself, what am I trying to defend? What do I believe is being threatened right now? She recommends listen without defending. Instead of matching their defensiveness, stay grounded. Practice active listening by reflecting back what they are saying. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated because... This approach helps your partner feeling heard without escalating the situation. She recommends to find the grain of truth. Even though their words might feel unfair, ask yourself, is what they're saying, is any part of that true? Acknowledging their perspective, even slightly, can reduce tension. I love the example of saying, I can see why you would feel that way. I may not have communicated clearly. She recommends to stay curious instead of critical. Respond with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Hey, can you help me understand what's really bothering you? This opens the door to more meaningful dialogue rather than defensiveness. She recommends practicing self-inquiry. If their words are triggering you, Katie talks about turning the focus inward. Instead of thinking, well, they shouldn't be defensive, turn it around and say, I shouldn't be so defensive. This shift allows you a part in the dynamic to respond with more compassion. So let's talk about some phrases that you can use. Some responsive phrases to acknowledge and understand would be, tell me more about that. I hear you. Can you help me understand better? That's interesting. What else are you feeling? I can see how you would feel that way. You could be right. Some responses that help reduce reactivity would be, I'm open. What do you suggest? I get it, and I'm willing to look at my part. Let's take a breath. I want to hear you clearly. I'm open to seeing things differently. Some responsive phrases to express a different opinion or perspective gently would be, I hear what you're saying, and I see it a little bit differently. That's an interesting point. My experience has been a bit different. Would you like to hear it? I can understand why you would feel that way. For me, it seems more like, I respect your perspective, and I have a different take on it. I'm not sure about that, but can we explore it together? That's not been my experience. Some responses, phrases to invite reflection might sound like, would you be open to looking at it from a different perspective? I wonder if there's more to this than we're seeing. Could we be right just in different ways? Is it possible there's another way to see this? Does eliminating defensiveness mean that you just let someone walk all over you. Well, Clay, I'm trying not to defend or protect myself, so they just came in and, yelled and screamed at me and called me a bunch of mean, nasty names, and I said, well, I don't want to be defensive, so I just laid there and took it. Not at all. No, you can have boundaries in a relationship. And if somebody is not communicating with respect towards you, you can set those boundaries and call for a timeout if those boundaries are broken. Quite often, defensiveness pairs well with communicating without respect. If you'd like to gain further understanding of what respectful communication sounds like, please see my episode in High Regards. If you find that your boundaries are being broken and that person continues to be defensive with you and continues to communicate with respect without respect towards you, call for a timeout. Please see my other episode on the timeout technique. Being connected to someone doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. And at the same time, I want you to read the room. As I mentioned before, create an awareness of what defensiveness feels like. Keep your ear tuned out for what it sounds like. When you pick up on those cues that your partner's being defensive, if you notice you're around a friend or family member who is experiencing stress and might be bordering on defensiveness, give them some space. Don't push their buttons. Don't take the bait. They're probably in their cave. Feel free to check out my other episode on cave time and understanding how to support our partner when they're having a bad day. And you've got to remember, when they do make those jabs at you, do you want to be happy? Or is it your job to be right and to prove them wrong and to make sure they're checking your boxes? So while defensiveness is a natural reaction, it can hinder open communication, cause tension, and prevent conflict resolution. Practicing active listening, empathy, self-awareness can help reduce defensive reactions and foster those healthier connections. So today I want to inspire you to create an awareness of the role that defensiveness plays in your relationship. Hold on to the understanding of why defensiveness creeps in and destroys our connections. Make those mental shifts to get out of that defensive mode and pick up on some of those comments where you can respond with connection in a defensive setting. Replace those reactive phrases with those connected responses. I highly recommend that you apply this tool in your relationships. If you'd like to book a complimentary clarity session with me to gain further understanding on how you can apply this principle in your relationships, click the link below and we can choose the time that works for you. Also, if you've received value from this video, I would appreciate you clicking that like button, hitting the subscribe bell. And if you've been implementing this relationship tool in your relationships, I would love to hear about your feedback and your experiences in the comment section below. Let's stay connected in those moments of tension by choosing to build a bridge instead of a wall.